Between the 1st and 2nd centuries AD, the world was dominated by two colossal empires at opposite ends of the Eurasian continent, the Roman Empire in the west and the Han Empire in the east. Their timelines of rise and fall show a stunning parallel, and each forged a political and cultural legacy in their respective spheres that endures to this day. In the west, an empire of steel and law. In the east, a dynasty built on bureaucracy and innovation. They were the undisputed superpowers of their age. But who was stronger?
Welcome back to China Puzzle. Today we're launching a new format to tackle big questions in Chinese history that can't be answered by looking at a single moment or event. We will provide a short answer of no more than a quarter of an hour, which is called Yi Kezhong in Chinese. So, let's begin with a fascinating and challenging question. Between China's Han Dynasty and the Roman Empire, who was truly the greater power? First, a disclaimer. Given that these two empires coexisted for over 200 years after 27 BC, any fair comparison must be anchored to a specific point in time. Second, this isn't a one-off matchup. Their strengths varied at different stages of their development. Therefore, we've designed a contest in 3 rounds across 3 distinct eras. Today, we begin round 1, the year 1 AD, the nascent Roman Empire versus the Western Han in its twilight. Introducing the contestants, the Roman Empire. At this moment, Rome is basking in the dawn of the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. The empire is a multicultural melting pot, governed by a political masterstroke, an absolute monarchy disguised in the traditional robes of a republic. It is a military and engineering behemoth, its influence radiating across the entire Mediterranean world. The Han Dynasty, China meanwhile, is at the end of the Western Han's golden age, a period of stability, prosperity, and cultural brilliance. It has perfected the centralized state system inherited from the Qin dynasty, creating a vast and efficient state machine. Its territory reaches deep into Central Asia, firmly controlling the nascent Silk Road, its prestige recognized far and wide. The rules of engagement. We will judge this contest across 5 key dimensions: societal foundations, political systems, economic strength, technological level, and military power. In each round, the leader will receive a perfect score of 100, while the other contestant will be scored relative to the gap between them. Finally, we'll tally the scores to declare the winner of round 1. Now, let the clash begin.
Here, we measure the most fundamental elements of imperial power: the land they controlled, the people they could mobilize, and how those people were organized. Territory and governance. The Western Han covered approximately 6 million square kilometers. This vast territory, centered on the Yellow and Yangtze river basins, radiated outwards to the western regions, modern Xinjiang and parts of Central Asia, south to northern Vietnam, and east to the Korean peninsula. In 1 AD, Rome's territory encircled the Mediterranean, making it seem like a private lake. Augustus had just incorporated Pannonia and Moesia, pushing the imperial frontier to the Danube River, and completed the conquest of Spain. Population. According to a household census in 2 AD, the Han population was a staggering 57.7 million people, with other estimates placing it as high as 63 million. This massive population was the bedrock of the Han's agrarian economy and military conscription system. Its capital, Chang'an, was a cosmopolitan metropolis with over 100,000 residents. In contrast, precise population figures for Rome in 1 AD are lacking. However, the historical consensus is that under Augustus, the empire's population was between 55 and 70 million, roughly on par with the Han. But the capital city of Rome itself is believed to have had a population of 1 million, making it the largest city in the world. This is supported by evidence like the grain dole recipients, the city's immense physical size, and analyses of the food and water supply systems required to sustain such a population. Social structure. Han society was officially divided into 4 classes: scholars, farmers, artisans, and merchants. In reality, wealthy merchants and landowners often wielded influence rivaling the nobility. Rome was a rigidly stratified society where status was determined by birth, wealth, and citizenship. The primary division was between patricians and plebeians, with a broader distinction between citizens, non-citizens, and slaves. Social mobility, while possible, was exceptionally difficult.
On the fundamentals, the two empires are incredibly close. Rome edges out the Han slightly due to the sheer scale of its capital city. While Rome demonstrated an astonishing ability to integrate diverse cultures, the Han's achievement in effectively governing such a massive and relatively homogeneous population within a single cultural framework is equally remarkable.
In this round, we dissect the governing software of the empires, how they were ruled, who held power, and on what principles justice was served. Government structure. The system created by Augustus, the Principate, was a work of political genius. On the surface, it preserved all the forms of the Republic, the Senate, consuls, and citizen assemblies. But in reality, it concentrated military, political, and religious authority in the hands of one man, the princeps, or first citizen. The Han, by contrast, was an unabashedly centralized monarchy. The emperor sat at the apex of the social pyramid, but he shared the duties of governance with a vast and sophisticated bureaucracy. The central government was structured around the 3 ducal ministers and 9 ministers. The 3 dukes, the chancellor, the grand marshal, and the imperial councillor, were responsible for administration, military affairs, and supervision, forming the emperor's core cabinet. Bureaucratic recruitment. The traditional path to power for the Roman elite was the cursus honorum, a sequence of public offices held in ascending order, culminating in the consulship. This was largely the exclusive domain of the senatorial class. Augustus's reform was to massively recruit from the equestrian class, appointing them as military commanders and provincial governors, thereby creating a professional administrative corps loyal to him personally. The Han pioneered a system of recommendation for selecting officials, most famously the filial and incorrupt system, where local officials were required to recommend men of high moral character to the central government. Furthermore, the Imperial University was established as the state's highest institution of learning, where students studied Confucian classics. The best graduates were directly appointed to government posts. Legal framework. The Romans developed a highly sophisticated, abstract, and systematic body of law that became the bedrock of the entire Western legal tradition. Its core principles included the presumption of innocence, the right of the accused to confront their accuser, and the need for evidence clearer than daylight for a conviction. Han law was a synthesis of the harsh legalist code of the Qin dynasty and the ethical principles of Confucianism. While retaining the basic framework of Qin law, the Han softened it with Confucian ideals of ritual and virtue, emphasizing moral education. Han justice was highly pragmatic and focused on day-to-day governance.
This is a very close contest. Rome's contribution to abstract legal principles is world-changing, and the political design of the Principate is a masterpiece of statecraft. However, the stable, rational, and merit-oriented bureaucracy created by the Han was arguably more effective at the day-to-day administration of a massive empire. It was less dependent on the personal genius of a single ruler and proved to be an incredibly resilient model of governance. For the sophistication and foresight of its administrative system, the Han Dynasty wins this round by a narrow margin.
In this round, we'll measure the economic engines of the 2 empires, from the fields that fed their people to the trade routes that filled their treasuries. The foundation of wealth. Agriculture. The Roman economy was built on the latifundia, vast agricultural estates owned by the elite. These large-scale plantations specialized in cash crops like grain, wine, and olive oil for export and sale. The labor force was composed primarily of a huge population of slaves. This model concentrated wealth in the hands of a few, but also led to the ruin of small farmers, who were forced into cities, becoming a source of social instability. The bedrock of the Han economy was the smallholding peasant. The government actively supported these independent farmers, as the land taxes paid by millions of them were the state's primary source of revenue. However, their lives were precarious, facing not only natural disasters, but also heavy taxes and labor duties. Many fell into debt and were forced to sell their land to large landlords, becoming tenant farmers. The engine of commerce, trade and industry Rome, commanded an unparalleled maritime trade network spanning the entire Mediterranean. A stable currency system, centered on the gold aureus and the silver denarius, greatly facilitated commerce. Roman trade was largely driven by private enterprise and was a primary engine of wealth creation. Han commerce was equally vibrant, but under the Confucian ideology that prioritized agriculture, merchants were ranked at the bottom of the social ladder. The state intervened in the economy far more than Rome did, most famously with the state monopolies on salt and iron. In foreign trade, the Silk Road was emerging, but it was primarily a state-led tributary trade, exchanging luxury goods like silk for war horses and exotic treasures. The lifelines of empire. Infrastructure. The Romans built a network of over 80,000 kilometers of paved, all-weather roads. Initially constructed for military purposes, these roads quickly became arteries of commerce and information, stimulating economic growth wherever they went. Their impact is still felt today. Han infrastructure focused more on water control. Its canals for transport and irrigation systems for agriculture were highly advanced. These projects were crucial for taming the flood-prone Yellow River, securing agricultural output, and feeding its massive population.
Driven by its vast and highly integrated Mediterranean trade network, Rome's economy appears more dynamic, commercialized, and monetized. Its infrastructure of roads and ports was second to none in facilitating the efficient movement of goods. Although the Han state-led model was highly effective at mobilizing resources for specific goals like war, and its total agricultural output was likely higher due to its population, the integration and commercial sophistication of the Roman economy was superior.
In this round, we compare the intellect and ingenuity that defined the technological peaks of each empire. Roman concrete, opus cementitium. This was a revolutionary building material made from lime mortar, aggregate, and volcanic ash, pozzolana. Its key advantage was its strength, plasticity, and ability to set underwater, allowing the Romans to build durable harbors, bridges, and magnificent structures like the Colosseum and the Dome of the Pantheon. Aqueducts. These were masterpieces of civil and hydraulic engineering. Operating entirely on gravity, these systems used precisely calculated gradients to bring fresh water from sources dozens of kilometers away into cities for public baths, fountains, and homes. Urban planning. Roman cities, especially new colonies, were often laid out in a standardized grid pattern. At the center was the Forum, a public square, surrounded by paved streets, public baths, theaters, and advanced sewer systems like Rome's Cloaca Maxima. Papermaking. While traditionally credited to Kai Lun in 105 AD, archaeological evidence shows that paper existed in the early Western Han. The key Han innovation was developing a process using cheap materials like tree bark, hemp, old rags, and fishnets to create an inexpensive and efficient writing medium, revolutionizing the storage and spread of knowledge. Steel technology. Han metallurgy was centuries ahead of the West. Craftsmen used blast furnaces to produce liquid pig iron, then developed techniques like the fining process to decarburize it into more resilient wrought iron and high-quality steel. Water-powered bellows, shui pai, dramatically increased smelting efficiency, allowing for the mass production of high-quality iron tools and weapons. Agricultural technology, the invention of the multi-tube iron seed drill, the Lu Che, allowed farmers to plow, sow, and cover seeds in a single operation. This saved enormous amounts of seed and labor. Combined with advanced iron plows, Han agricultural productivity soared. Scientific instruments, the Han polymath. Zhang Heng, whose work represents the pinnacle of Han science, invented the world's first seismoscope, capable of detecting the direction of distant earthquakes. He also constructed a water-powered armillary sphere, a complex and precise instrument for modeling celestial movements.
This is another clash between two different kinds of genius. Rome's achievements in monumental public engineering were breathtaking and dramatically improved the quality of urban life and state logistics. However, the Han breakthroughs in fundamental areas like papermaking, steel production, and precision instruments represent more transformative technological leaps. For the sheer breadth of its innovations and their profound long-term impact, the Han Dynasty wins this round by the slimmest of margins.
In our final round, we compare the military machines that these empires used to conquer and defend their vast domains. Army composition. The heart of the Roman military was the professional legion. Soldiers were Roman citizens serving for terms of 25 years. This was a standing army, highly trained and ruthlessly disciplined. The legion, a unit of about 5,000 men, was supplemented by auxiliary forces composed of non-citizens who provided cavalry and specialized troops like archers. Han military power was based on a system of universal conscription. All able-bodied men aged 23 to 56 were required to serve for 2 years, 1 year in training and 1 year on the frontiers. This meant the bulk of the Han army consisted of short-term conscripts led by professional officers. The system could mobilize enormous armies, but the average experience and professionalism of the soldiers were lower than that of a Roman legionary. Tools of war. The Roman legionary was equipped for intense, close-quarters combat. His gear included the famous segmented armor, lorica segmentata, a large curved shield, scutum, a heavy throwing javelin, pilum, and the iconic short stabbing sword, the gladius. Rome's advantage lay in military engineering and heavy artillery. They deployed powerful torsion artillery, like the ballista and the scorpio, for both sieges and field battles. The Han soldier wore lamellar armor, constructed from small, overlapping iron plates. Their primary weapon was the Huan Shou Dao, a single-edged steel sword over a meter long, designed for slashing. The quality of this weapon, made possible by advanced Han metallurgy, was second to none. The Han military mass-produced powerful crossbows with sophisticated bronze trigger mechanisms, some with draw weights exceeding 350 pounds. Crossbowmen often made up as much as 50% of their infantry forces. Tactical doctrine Rome was famous for its disciplined and flexible heavy infantry. The classic triplex aces formation allowed fresh troops from the rear lines to relieve fatigued soldiers at the front, maintaining constant pressure on the enemy. They also perfected defensive formations like the testudo, or tortoise. The Han employed combined arms tactics, integrating massive formations of crossbowmen, heavy infantry, and powerful cavalry forces. Their typical strategy was to disrupt and weaken the enemy with overwhelming volleys of crossbow bolts before committing infantry and cavalry for the decisive blow.
This is the most difficult round to judge. The Roman legionary was undoubtedly the best trained and most disciplined heavy infantryman of the ancient world, and Rome's engineering and logistical capabilities were unmatched. However, the Han's technological edge, the mass deployment of high-performance crossbows, was a game-changer. Combined with the advantage of their superior steel swords in close combat, the Han military wins the final round. Their decisive technological advantage and successful adaptation to their primary strategic threat give them the edge.
After 5 intense rounds of competition, the final scores are in. Roman Empire, 484 points. Han Dynasty, 487 points. The winner of this clash of giants is the Han Dynasty.
This victory is built on the Han's solid foundations, its sophisticated and stable bureaucracy, and a series of world-changing technological innovations, while Rome's legal genius, economic dynamism, and the sheer power of its legions are undeniable. In this peak versus peak matchup around 1 AD, the Han emerges as a more technologically advanced, administratively cohesive, and militarily well-rounded state. The genius of Rome was outward-facing and integrative. It used law to govern strangers, roads to connect them, and armies to conquer them. It was a machine built to create a multicultural world empire. Perhaps it was the Windows of its time. The genius of the Han was inward-facing and administrative. It used bureaucracy to manage its vast population, technology to enhance their productivity, and an army designed to defend its core territory. It was a machine built to perfect a single, vast civilization. Perhaps it was the iOS.